So thank you all for coming. If you don't already know me, my name is Rishika Patel, and I'm the Chief Inclusion Officer here at the School of Nursing. I've been here for about 3 years, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about sort of the genesis of today, how this event sort of came about, and then I'm going to go ahead and let the panelists kind of introduce themselves by answering a question. But I want you to know that this is really intended to be a dialogue. So if you have a question or a follow-up question, please go ahead and just raise your hand and ask it. So just a little bit of history. About a year ago, I received information that the American Academy of Men in Nursing has this award, right? And the award is for any school or college that provides the best academic learning environment for men who want to become nurses. And they measure this by looking at recruitment, retention, academic progression, and graduation rates of men. And so I was interested, of course, in applying for the award, but I was actually more interested in looking at what the criteria were for the award, so we could develop a kind of roadmap within the school for distinguishing ourselves as an excellent place for learning for men who are wanting to become nurses. And so we decided to have this program as a way of sort of bringing in some stories, bringing in some experiences, both from students and from people practicing in the field, to get us on the roadmap to eventually submitting for that award and receiving it. But even more importantly, being a community that is inclusive for everybody, including our students who are men. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of hand it over to the panelists. We have many. Thank you so much for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedules to be here. Thank you also to the students. I see many of you. I hope you're ready to ask some questions, and to the faculty and staff who just care about the students and decided to come to learn how to better support them. So the first question, and I'll kind of hand it over to you. If you can tell us a little bit about what was your path to becoming a nurse? You know, kind of quickly answering the question, because there's so many of you and we want to give everybody a chance to introduce themselves. And if you can also talk about where you are in Michigan medicine, that would be great. And as you have questions, please feel free to raise your hand. Tell us about your path.
Happy to start.
Yeah, let me make sure this is on. There you go.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Jesus Cepero. I'm the Chief Nursing Officer at Women and Children's Hospital here at University of Michigan. Been a nurse now for 34 years. I started my nursing career early as an EMT paramedic in New Jersey. So if you hear a little bit of an accent, that's where I'm from. I immigrated to New Jersey as an exile from Cuba when I was 8 years old. So kind of grew up here in this country, and I love it. Really living the American dream. But as a paramedic, I would bring patients to the hospital and really recognize how great our emergency room trauma nurses were. And even as at 17, 18 years old, when I was doing that, that's where my passion for wanting to be a nurse came in. And really started as a diploma nurse. I didn't really have a lot of options for schools back then, but really became in love with our profession. And this profession has been really good to me personally. I've been able to do many, many different aspects of nursing throughout my career, from pre-hospital trauma nurse, to flight nurse, to forensic nurse with the medical examiner's office for about 11 years, working on the homicide squad. And through my career, I started transitioning into leadership positions. Always felt a passion for leadership also, and have been holding many, many different roles, from charge nurse to nursing supervisor to director to vice president, and now chief nursing officer. So for all of you, whether you're male or not, I think nursing is a wonderful profession that could open many, many doors for you. And I'm so happy to see all your faces here today, because we need so many great nurses in our profession.
I'm Paul Edick. I'm a staff nurse in child and adolescent psychiatry. So a few of you have been my students, or maybe my students, because I've been there 8 years as a staff nurse, but I've taught for also 4 years here as a clinical instructor. So my first degree was here in LS&A, and I graduated, unfortunately, during a really rough time in the economy, so 2007, and then things hit. So I wasn't necessarily thinking about nursing then. I enjoyed serving other people and helping out, and it really was my maternal grandmother who had a home care nurse that was a male and talked a lot about how compassionate he was, and I think inspired me to start looking at second career programs, which were really, really big at the time. So I went to Michigan State actually for my BSN. So then I found myself in Grand Rapids briefly at Pine Rest, which is a standalone psych hospital. And then Nicole, who's my boss, who's moving up to a DEI wellness nurse leader role, she actually hired me back 8 years ago. And so I came back to the U and then got into teaching, which has become a real passion for mine. And I have my MSN in nursing education from Western, and I plan hopefully soon to go for my PhD.
Hi, my name's Rob Wanacott. I have an interesting path to nursing. I would have told you when I graduated high school, never be a nurse, had no plans. I was the prototypical jock, played a lot of sports, was really good at football, was playing college football, and I suffered an injury. I had a fracture of my T8 vertebrae, and that was the end of contact sports for me. A little lost, didn't know what to do, applied to generic community college, and got accepted to a program called nursing. I'm like, well, the nurses were nice when I was in the hospital, gave it a try. And it's funny how the world works. Has turned out to be the best thing that's ever happened to me in my life. How I got pushed into this role, I stopped wondering why that happened. That freak accident that drove me to this has been the greatest thing ever. I've been a nurse now for 25 years. I've been at Michigan since 1999. I spent 18 years in the surgical ICU as 14 years of it as the ed coordinator. I spent 10 years teaching at the old school of nursing for a while as a guest lecturer on complex care, and have transitioned to my current job 4 years ago as the manager of the Nursing Information Services Department. So we do a lot of work with gadgets and electronics and fidget light monitors, pagers. We're going to be deploying some phones soon, which will be interesting. But yeah, it was a really unique way I got into it, and was really the best thing. I would have told you I was going to be a phys ed teacher as my lifelong goal. Never had a lot of exposure to nursing where I grew up because I grew up in rural Canada. And so if you ever want to have a conversation about healthcare for all, I'd be a willing member to debate that willingly with you. It may not be everything you want, but not a lot of access to it. And so when my injury happened and it was my first exposure to healthcare, it was the nurses that stood out as the ones who really took care of me. And then once I got into the school and into the role and kind of study things, it was the job that was meant for me. So it's kind of funny how the world spins sometimes. So interesting.
My name's Rob Burke, and my role, or how I got into nursing, that was something like right from the beginning when I was in high school that I identified as, I wanted to pursue nursing as a career. And that actually came from, I think a unique family dynamic. I'm the youngest of like 4 older sisters. And so I grew up with a bunch of kids that were my nephews and nieces at the house. And I really enjoyed being with the kids. And as I went through school, growing up, I've always had an affinity for kids that were struggling, whether they had some type of chronic disease or something like that. I always was the one to come alongside of them, stand up. I was also a jock growing up. And so, I was the one standing up, for them. And so, that kind of is where it birthed as far as how could I pursue that in a grander way and throughout my life, and not in education or anything like that. So I went into nursing in the hopes of, I wanted to do pediatric oncology. That's where I wanted to go, give kids a smile for that moment of their life. I then went into college as a jock as well, and started in a BSN program playing baseball. That kind of schedule got rough, and I stayed with baseball through college. Then graduating, I went back and I wasn't finished with my nursing. So I actually then went on, got my LPN first because I could do that in a year, start working, making money while I did it. Then finished my RN, then my BSN through Purdue, and then eventually on to my MBAs where I went. As I started my profession as nursing, though, I I got into a burn center in Indiana. It was a regional burn center, and we took care of, everything from kids to geriatrics, from surgery to some of the sickest patients that you can have. And so that's where, that passion for the kids really went there. And I think what's really cool about nursing is just how many different avenues you can get in that you don't even realize. I think even at this stage of my career, after 20 years of nursing, there's still new things you're finding out about nursing. Like, I could get in, I could go this way with my career into this path, which is really, really cool. And as I was at that bedside, it opened up doors to then start running and being a counselor and working with a statewide burn camp for kids, and being, doing that work, created a support group. So there's so many just different avenues that you can go with wherever you are, whatever your passion is, you can really pursue it. And that's what's so awesome about the profession of nursing.
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. My name is Nick Wolfarth. I'm a SWAT nurse, so I'm a staff nurse here at the hospital. SWAT is Specialized Workforce for Acute Transport. We do high-risk transport procedures and sedations for neonates, pediatrics, adults, anything from LVADs to babies that are a pound. So we work across the spectrum. My story, but this here, we got a bunch of former athletes here. So essentially, I was the same way. I grew up in college. I was a bodybuilder, football player. That was my thing. I was in a school for accounting, and I was day trading out of my dorm. So did not think at all I was going to go into nursing. But then as opportunities came along, I went and shadowed accountants, and I was sitting in a cubicle 5 days a week. I don't know about you guys, but when I was 20, 19 years old, I didn't want to sit in a cubicle 5 days a week. So I went there. They were spending 12-hour days in there, and I was like, I can't do this. So I wanted to pursue nursing. I went and shadowed my cousin. She worked in Detroit. Have any of you guys been to Detroit Hospital, ER over there? Their ER is crazy. So there was gunshot victims, there's trauma, there's bleeds, there's everything going on there. And one thing from sports and athletic background is like, I'm an adrenaline junkie. So seeing all that stuff and like, so rewarding to like, you literally have somebody's life in your hands and you save them. Like that's just a very rewarding sensation. So that drove me to nursing. So I wanted to pursue it. They wouldn't let me do it at school. So while playing football, which I thought was kind of wild, but it is what it is. So I went down, got my bachelor's at Lourdes College, and then I got my master's in nursing education. Since that time now, I've been working up here and absolutely loving my job, and I'm starting to get more into like analytics. I'm using Tableau and getting more involved as every day goes on. So it's just really exciting. I'm very grateful for this opportunity.
Okay, so I'll mix it up a little bit. I was in the band, so I did not go to college as a jock. I did go thinking I might want to be a music teacher, but I really had no plan. So my name is Devin Carr. I'm the Chief Nursing Officer for the University Hospital and Cardiovascular Center. I am I say an accidental nurse. So I graduated from high school and first person in my family to go to college, and I didn't really have a clue or a plan. As reflected in my 1.0 GPA for my first semester, which gets you a personal letter from the dean. So I knew I needed to figure out what I wanted to do, and I really had no clue. But also being from a small town, I had an opportunity to join up and work with the volunteer ambulance service and go to school and become an emergency medical technician. So similar to Jesus's background. And I thought that was like the coolest thing. I was 19 years old and riding in the back of an ambulance and seeing all this really neat stuff. And so I knew I wanted to do more than that. And so I explored kind of healthcare careers based on what I would see in the hospital. And I saw what the respiratory therapy role was. And I thought, that's what I want to do. And so I went to school and I became a respiratory therapist. And I practiced for a number of years, the whole time knowing that I wanted a 4-year degree and thinking that I probably, as I practiced in respiratory therapy, I thought I wanted to be a nurse anesthetist. So that, of course, required going to nursing school. And so that was my 4-year degree pathway. And so I went and got my BSN. Spent some time in the OR and found out that it wasn't as much fun as I thought it would be. And like Nick, I stayed for 6 hours in the OR beside anesthesia one day and didn't move the whole time. And I still remember that day and how long it was. So I recognized that might not be what I wanted to do, but I still went and did the 1 year of critical care that I knew I needed to do, and I actually really liked it. And I liked being a bedside nurse. I liked the opportunity to, after I'd been there a while, to be able to precept new students. I got to do some education. So I kind of had a series of changes in my career. We had a diploma program at the hospital where I worked. And so after a few years, I was offered a faculty position. And during that time, I went back and got my master's. Thought, education was really the route I wanted to go. And we, in the late 1990s, early 2000s, we transitioned that program to a college. And so we closed that down. And so it was time for me to make a decision about what I wanted to do next. And that's when I moved into leadership. And so At that time, I also moved back to the Middle Tennessee area, so I worked at Vanderbilt for a number of years through a variety of leadership positions, and stayed in that role. And it was went there to be the clinical specialist in the ICU, I thought, and they instead wanted me to be the assistant manager, and so I reluctantly took that job, but it was the best decision that I made, and it put me on a very different career path. And so during that time there, I kept picking up larger areas of responsibility until the point that I left and came here 2.5 years ago to be the CNO.
That's a tough act to follow. Hi, I'm David Lieber. I'm a nurse on 12 East at Mott Children's Hospital. Yeah, I'm a little intimidated by all these initials, but I do also have an RN there, so maybe we can pencil that one in. It's really interesting to hear all these different paths. So mine, I was an architect in my previous life. I graduated with a master's at the University of Michigan, and I did that for about 15 years. And then when the decline came in about 2007, 2008, I still had a job, barely, but I just wasn't loving the career anymore. So I decided to kind of explore what else I liked. My passion's always been helping people. I was the president of the Ann Arbor JCs at the time, and always really liked sort of giving back to the community and helping people. So a friend of mine was a landscape architect, and he went back to school at Wayne State, became a nurse here, and he worked on 4D of the neuro ICU. So I shadowed him for a day, and I shadowed another nurse that was a good friend of mine, and it was something that I really thought I'd like. So the first thing I did was I volunteered in the adult PACU for a year. So I kind of took a halt in doing anything career-wise and just did that for a year to make sure I can even be around like sick people, because I never have done that before, and I loved it. So I went to school. I went back to school here. I went through the second career program here, got through that, a little bit of prereqs at Washington Community College, and then the one-year program here. And then I got hired right on at 12 East Mott, the old Mott, for about 3 months, and then they built a new hospital. Took a job there. My graduation day, I skipped graduation, and my clinical instructor actually dragged me along to go to Haiti. It was right after the big earthquake in Haiti. So I had such a good experience in my clinical in the old Mott that she thought I'd be a good candidate to go with her. So we spent a week doing 6 12-hour shifts at the acute care hospital in Port-au-Prince. That was pretty fascinating to see what maybe not even a third world country hospital is like. But when I came back, I just jumped right in and started at 12 East Mott. So I'm a staff nurse there. I don't really have any desire at this point to add any more initials. I really absolutely love what I do. There's so much about just working with the kids that's so fulfilling. So, I have a number of different roles on the unit, a number of committees I've worked on. I've been charge nurse, one of the many committees I've worked on. But I really do love pediatrics. When I was in school, all of my teachers were female, except for Rob when he came in to do our lecture, and he brought your buddy with you from the ICU. So it was nice to see that when I was going through nursing school as well. So thanks.
Hello, my name is David Jerkins. As we talk about past nursing, I guess mine started with, what I think I was going to do. I thought I was going to be an engineer, computer science. I've always had an affinity for technology, and so I thought I was going to do stuff with computers. And then, kind of like everyone else said, once you see what programming actually is, it means you can sit anywhere you want to for a long period of time and then submit that to a team. That team is not necessarily with you or in the same state. So it's kind of like a lonely job. And I like talking to people, a little more loquacious than I probably should be. And so I was like, how can I help people and talk to people? And so I looked in a couple of different healthcare options. My brother and sister, they're both physicians. So they were shadowing at DMC in their ER, and they're like, hey, you should come shadow too. And so I did that, and I was like, all right, this seems interesting. So when I graduated with my degree, switched from engineering to physiology at Michigan State, graduated. It was a couple years post 9/11, so I was a reservist in the Marine Corps at the time, so I went on active duty, just wanted to serve my country some more. After I finished doing that, I got out and was trying to find a job. And so, again, a couple years before 2008, I had experience in not really a marketable skill that I learned in the Marine Corps, and so because of that, I couldn't really find a job. So I became a janitor, went to a 2-year community college for my nursing degree. My dad ended up passing away at that same time, and so he spoke highly of the nurses that were taking care of him in the hospital. So that kind of helped me go into nursing. shadowed SWAT originally after career fair, and then got a job in trauma and burn ICU. Worked there for 2 years. I was in the SICU for 6 or 7. After that, I worked with technology, using monitors, phones. Worked with Rob for a bit, and in the last 5 months, I have been working as a supervisor on 7A.
Well, hi, everyone. My story is a little bit different from everyone up here. Not quite a jock, but I am an artsy kind of guy. Before I became a nurse, I actually wanted to become a medical illustrator. Wow. So when I was in school, I loved to draw. Loved to draw anatomy and physiology type of things. Then I took a CPR class. And they actually sparked my interest in medicine is by taking that first CPR class. Because 6 months after I took that CPR class, I was involved in an incident where a child was actually drowning in a pool. And I was actually able to jump into the pool, pull the child out, and perform CPR. And it was like 6 months after I got my CPR card. I never knew whatever happened to that child afterwards. I just know that we regained a pulse, the child started breathing, but was still unconscious. So I had no idea what happened to this child. So I wanted to find out more about medicine. So I took my very first EMT class. Figured that's a great transition from getting my BLS, getting my CPR card. And I worked in the city of Detroit as an ER tech on my EMT license. But I still wanted more, so I went to get my paramedic license. I worked the roads of Detroit and Redford and areas like that. The only problem with that, it was great. I'm an adrenaline junkie, love taking care of people, going in situations that are unknown. But I would never find out what happened to these people after I take care of them. So I discovered a nursing program through Henry Ford Community College. So I took a class there, and I started to like it. And at the same time, I was able to get a job here at the university as an ER tech. So I got a lot of influence from different medical providers, nurses, techs, kind of coaching me on how I should pursue my nursing career. Then I found out there's not very many nurses, male nurses in pediatrics, especially when it comes to ER medicine. There's very few male ER nurses in pediatric ER. So when the new Mott Hospital opened, at that time I was a nurse working both adult and pediatric ER, but when the new Mott Hospital opened, this was a perfect opportunity to explore my passion for taking care of pediatric patients. So once that opened, I've been there ever since. And 22 years later, I'm still here. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Raja Isa. I'm the nursing supervisor on CVC 5. Pretty much I've been a nurse now for 14 years. I grew up in the Middle East, in the country Lebanon. Middle East is always like one of those hot zone area in the world. A lot of wars, a lot of religious stuff going on. So hopefully we'll have some peace one day. Again, being apart from, growing in a family with they value being, a good person, nursing was a normal pathway for me. I was always looking in my high school about what's the best profession that can give me the sense of purpose of taking care of people, regardless of their age, religion, gender, identity. So nursing was my first choice. I went to nursing school at the American University of Beirut, get my BSN, and then on my first job was I picked up pediatric ICU. I was the first male, first pediatric male in the hospital there. So that was a little bit awkward to me, and for the population there, and for a lot of people. Like when you see, you go inside the room and then you see the mom or the parents. Who are you? The doctor was like, no, I'm the nurse. And this was always everybody's reaction there. So I started as a pediatric nurse. I value every moment of it. It also gave a lot of courage for a lot of people to go and move to the pediatric specialty. Again, it was so rewarding to me. You will live with families, you will live with these patients and make difference every day. Through the time, nursing transformed me compared to a lot of my colleagues to be a better person, a better friend, a better son. I mean, it's something that literally was changing me, giving me maturity at an early age. I didn't want to stop. I went back to school and I got my master's degree, where I went also, I was privileged to go to Johns Hopkins, do my clinical hours, my training at Hopkins, where I was exposed to large system. Again, when you're talking nursing, it's the same identity everywhere you go in the world. You're a nurse. In 2011, we immigrated to Michigan. We came in here and I started working in Detroit. Big experience. I worked in the emergency department there and Children's Hospital. And then I same time started working at Henry Ford until I started working at the university here, which I'm very grateful. It kindly changed my whole career path, where I went back again to school and I get my DNP. It's all based on a passion. How can I, face more challenges, make, difference for people, for families, and for patients. Move to the quality work, move to the patient safety work, accreditation work. And again, every time it's a new role, it's a new challenge, it's a new things you learn. It's like it's growing you every day. It's growing the leader inside you every day. And this is all because of nursing. If you're bored with something, you can always change. This is the ABC of nursing. Finally, and I'm grateful for a lot of people sitting here. I'm sitting with them in the panel. I consider a great mentor. I had a couple of conversations in the last year with Devin, Jesus, a lot of people on the table about also seeking more, expanding my horizon, seeking more experience in operations, which again, now here I am being supervisor, learning how to lead by example, learning how to every single intervention you're making can affect staff, can affect employee, can affect family. Literally, it's like learning budget, learning numbers, learning to implement things on a different level. Again, it's something new, and I'm truly enjoying it. And I'm enjoying every single moment from nursing since those 14 years.
Hey, thank you. So, I just want to appreciate, first of all, the diversity of pathways to your nursing careers. I also want to appreciate the similarity that you all have, the passion, the sense of conviction, the deep desire to make a difference in the lives of others and to work with people. And I just want to appreciate that, that you told your story and you shared that with us. For the remaining 90 minutes of this dialogue, we're going to kind of switch up the format a bit. I'm going to ask for some questions from our students, from our staff, our faculty, our visitors. And I'm going to ask you, if you would, you can address them to specific people on the panel, or you can just sort of ask the question, and maybe you can decide who will take it so that everybody has a chance to provide some insight on these questions. Okay? So is there a question that anybody wants to ask at this point? Yeah, Robbie. Should I? Yeah. Let me use the mic so he can. Thanks. Yeah. There you go.
Thank you. So I am a new graduate nurse, but in just regards to the topic of men in nursing, or I guess I should say, first off, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule of having wonderful leadership and nursing staff with well-rounded, diverse backgrounds that you all have. But I guess my question is that being a new grad nurse and just going through all my clinicals and experiences that I've had so far, I got to witness social stigmas against men within nursing, as men being considered less than as being a nurse compared to a doctor, or I guess just negative social stigmas that could be about being a male nurse. What do you guys all think it takes to battle against these stigmas? And then what do you guys think could be implemented more within the hospital in regards to branding and being that exemplar that you guys all are to make that more, I guess, worldwide within the University of Michigan Medicine?
Right in there. Thank you for that question. It was great responses to this question. So, yep, we'll just start here and feel free to circulate the mic.
I'm sure we're all going to have comments on this because we have lived it for our lives, right? So, and the first thing is you got to acknowledge it. It's there. And that's what you really work on. You take what they're saying to you and you show it by your actions, you're caring, the knowledge that you bring to the experience. And I would be challenged to find a situation that I wasn't able to turn into a positive event. But you just have to acknowledge what's there and hear what they're saying and really get to what the meat of the problem is underneath. Usually it's not you, the person. A lot of times it's other things. And as long as they know that they're being heard, oftentimes patients and families are fine with it. In my 22 years of being a direct caregiver, only one time was I ever asked to not care for somebody. Other than that, never was I asked to step out of the room. I had a few people question it, and then once we started talking, got into the issue, it was always okay. But you really got to acknowledge it, hear what they're saying, and then work through it. You can get through it pretty easily.
So I would answer the question in three ways. First, the stigma is there. How do we introduce ourselves? I introduce myself as a nurse. My wife's a nurse, and when she introduced herself, she's a nurse, but we're male nurses. So for me, I think the thing that has to happen is we have to educate people as to what nurses are, what nurses do, and that it is equally done as well by a male or female, and that gender really does not have that much of an influence on how we care for patients, families, and the community. Second, I would have to say you have to be yourself and really know yourself well emotionally, because it is difficult to deal with those stereotypes. When I, was 17 and working in a firehouse with mostly male partners that were all paramedics, and when I first started to broach the idea of, hey, maybe I want to be a nurse, you can imagine in the 1980s, there was only about 2 or 3% of the nurses in the country were male. That stigma was really there. And yes, I took a lot of beatings and, brow beatings and a lot of name callings that were done in jest, but sometimes they were not, and they did hurt. But 10 years later, as I started to educate my partners who were paramedics about what nurses did, and then when I would come into the firehouse and started to talk about the open chest we did, and I got to do cardiac massage and help put in chest tubes, and they were like, wow. I would say out of the 9 or 10 best friends that I had that were paramedics, about 8 of them became nurses because of it. So for us in nursing, it's really important for us to not only express what we bring to the profession, but to continue to educate other males about our wonderful profession and help them get into it.
Before I answer this, I have one question for you, though. How did this happen when you see those stereotypes? Can you give an example? Was it among family or was it among physicians?
Thank you. I guess one example would be that I would walk in just as a tech job, and a lot of patients would be like, "Are you my doctor?" And I'm like, "No, I'm actually not even just your nurse. I'm actually just a nurse aide right now." And they're like, "Oh, okay, never mind. Sorry. I'll wait until the doctor comes." And I'm like, "All right, I guess you're just telling me to go kick rocks now." So, so that's just one thing where you can be considered as less than. And then another one is the same thing about how, since it is a female-dominated profession, you may be viewed as feminine or not as, well, the three of you, as macho or as jock or things like that. So, but I think you guys have all started to describe it how I think it's a wonderful thing, and I know I've personally tried to do it, is be that exemplar. Because then if you are the example, that's how more people start to follow in those footsteps. But just to answer your own question, some of those stigmas, I think it's, you're viewed as maybe feminine or a lesser because you're not the typical standard doctor. I think most people, when they think of men in a medical profession, they think you have to become a doctor, not a nurse. And so that's why I think you can be considered as less than.
A great response. Exceptional response. Basically, I just wanted to gear that too, because I worked as a nurse's aide as well. So I've worked at multiple different hospitals, and I've seen that happen firsthand. And the way that I handle it personally is when I go into a room, or if I'm talking to a patient, a family member, or a physician, it doesn't matter who that is, I introduce myself and what my role is. So a lot of times I'll even say, my name's Nick. I'll even say I'm a nurse sometimes, just to joke around and make some light of it, to have some fun. Because patients, they have no control of what's going on. So sometimes, like, comedy is a way for them to, like, just relax a little bit, because everything's so uptight and they just want to get better, and sometimes I really appreciate that. But I always go in there and introduce myself, and a lot of times that sets a precedent then for that patient not to have that misconception, or that physician not to have that misconception, and then you can articulate the facts and prove yourself kind of clinically to them as well. So I feel like since I've embraced that, it's been really well received. So does that answer your question? Yeah. Awesome.
I would just add a couple of things to that. So I grew up in a small town, rural Tennessee, where you didn't go to school to become a nurse. So it just wasn't something that you even thought about. And so, as I said, I sort of accidentally became a nurse. And I'll be very honest with you, I didn't want to tell people that I was going to school to be a nurse, because I knew there was stigma associated with it. And that comes from really a place of ignorance. And so my mom had a fit when I said I was going to nursing school, and she thought it was horrible. And but she also went to school at age 50 and became an EMT, and she went to work full-time for the ambulance service. And so she worked with all these paramedics. And then she found out, like, they were all struggling trying to get into nursing school and applying year after year. And she realized that there's, like, this whole cadre of men who want to be a nurse. And so it changed the way she was thinking about it. And so then, they're all trying to apply, and she's going, well, my son's in nursing school. So it was very different then. So I think that part of that too. And I think when it's what's people's lived experience. And it doesn't necessarily come from a hateful place. It really comes from an uninformed place. And I think even, when people would say, like, oh, you're a male nurse, and that's not to signify that you're less than. It's just you're a novelty. And so I think that there is a lot of stigma. I think I found out when I went into nursing that my female nursing counterparts, all of the things that they complained bitterly about by being treated differently as a woman, they were equally guilty of for treating their male nursing counterparts. And so the reality is, we all struggle as human beings to be nice sometimes. And so I'd say you kind of take those experiences and reflect on them and really try to understand the deeper meaning, and then always resolve to do better yourself.
Can I go real quick? I just want to bring up another, kind of area of it too, because I don't know if we always think about it, but just as Devin was saying with your colleagues, I remember clinical and walking into when it was peds and OB, right? And I walked into that labor and delivery area for the first time, and everybody looked at, the nurses, and they were very senior nurses that had been there for a very long time, and this was, 20 some years ago. So, they were in the profession where, unfortunately, for a lot of women back then too, it was kind of a track of you could go nursing, be a teacher, or like a secretary type of thing, right? And it was almost kind of like an invasion of, like, you're a guy, why are you coming into our profession? You don't belong here. And what I'm so thankful in the nursing profession, how we've progressed, right, for men in nursing and that sort of thing. But being there, and I think just as some of my colleagues said, it's you have to be yourself. And so when you walk in that situation, it's like I can understand that. And first of all, I have to appreciate kind of maybe your feeling, but I'm here to also show you that I can belong here, and I will belong here, and show you that I can give that care, and you will quickly win anybody over when you kind of have that attitude in life.
I think I actually faced the most stigma when I graduated, and I think it's because there's this idea of what a male nurse is and what fields you can and cannot work in. Typically, when I say I'm a nurse, people say, oh, work in an ICU? Nope. Nurse anesthetist? Nope. Supervisor? Nope. I'm a psych nurse. Oh, you deal with the feelings. But when actually you're in psych nursing, it's pretty male dominated in a lot of facilities you work at. And I also found there to be a lot of stigma when I'm talking to perhaps the counterparts I went to school with that are male nurses. There's this idea of what we should be. And I think the most stigma, is from fellow males in nursing at times. Not this panel, but I think there's conversations I've had where people really I have to articulate my practice and what I do, and then they can see, wow, you do more than just the feelings. And I would say, yes, like shadow in my shoes. And Robbie, I feel like, is a plant, but I trained Robbie, and he works on my floor, and he can tell you, like, and Dr. Strobe, that there is quite a lot we do in psych nursing. So I think it's helping people understand that male nurses do a lot besides ICU and nurse anesthetists.
Great, thank you. An additional question. I see lots of students in the room, and I'm very happy. Anything you'd like to ask at this point? Okay. Oh.
Feel free to ask us anything.
Yeah, I have some too.
Hello. I'd like to say, as the first guy said, thank you for coming and doing this panel. So nursing in recent years has become a more attractive career option for men, but still it's a largely female-dominated profession as it has been in the past. 90% female, 10% male. Excuse me. And you see, like, in comparison to medical schools, for example, which has largely been a male-dominated profession in the past, for the first time in recent years, medical school classes have been 50-50. Besides the overall just educating men about the profession, what specific measures do you recommend to encourage men to enter nursing?
Thank you.
Well, I'll start. I think it's important that we do more. I think the schools are doing a lot more outreach in communities teaching about nursing and really targeting people in middle school and high school to understand that there is this profession beyond. I think when you maybe work in a community that's more isolated or rural, you have this understanding of what are preferred professions, and breaking those stereotypes, I think, is where we start.
I guess I'd like to. I have a lot of friends that are in male-dominated fields as well, and I will tell you in hindsight now, because I've been a nurse for, I'm kind of the baby here, but 8 years I've been a nurse, and a lot of them wish they would have went into nursing because they're working 60 hours a week. Their boss dictates when they work, how they work, what shifts they work, how limited vacation time they have, and I will tell you there's no better career than like nursing, because you work 3 days a week if you choose to. You get vacation time, you can schedule it out, you can kind of schedule your shifts. I would say a lot of those, my friends that are male-dominated fields, in hindsight, wish they went to nursing school. And that's kind of funny to reflect on, it's been 10 years ago, and to see like them saying that and admitting that, because these are like, your guys, and you're like, really? You guys wasn't? They're like, yeah. They really regret it. They wish they would have went into it. So kudos to all you guys.
Yeah, Rob, good question. Rob is one of my students, actually, on 12 East. Hey, so one of the things I try to instill upon our students is what it's like to be a male nurse in a female-dominated world. That's kind of a question I get from some of the male students that I have, because right now we have probably 65 staff nurses on 12 East, and there's 4 guys. 3 of them work the night shift, so I'm the one day shift guy, or some of my patients call me the boy nurse, which is kind of cute. It's been a positive thing all around. I was the first, myself and another student that I graduated with, we were the first 2 male nurses hired into 12 East. So it was a big shift for the unit. It was a lot for those nurses to sort of get used to the fact that there's a male nurse working for them. But I just try to encourage students to just, take a look and see what it's about, see what effect we're having not only on our staff, which is usually really positive. A lot of our female nurses say they kind of like the balance, and I think probably the women in the audience probably know what I'm talking about. But a lot of our patients really appreciate having a male nurse, especially in the pediatric world. There's a lot of times I've had multiple long conversations with 15-year-old boys about issues not only with what's going on with their medical condition, but what's going on with their life, that they can't have that conversation maybe with a female nurse. It maybe makes them feel like they're talking to their mom or the grandmother. So I let students know the kind of impact you can have on the patients being a male nurse. But I do think if you ask any of the women on our unit, they absolutely love having male nurses. And I also, encourage students to look like at this panel, for example, of the variety of careers you can have. So it's not just bedside nursing. I mean, I love bedside nursing. I'll probably retire on 12 East. But look where you can go. Laterally, up, across, different hospitals within the University of Michigan system, or literally anywhere in the country needs nurses. You can go anywhere and do anything you want with that career. So,
just to kind of add on what these guys have said, I think, very similarly, like nursing could take you everywhere you wanted to go. Like for me, I had different passions and things I wanted to work on, but throughout this field of healthcare, I've been able to incorporate, my practice of technology, working with people, talking to people, educating myself, educating family members and staff. And, believe it or not, when you're in the Marine Corps and you say, hey, I want to go to school for nursing, not as well received as you think it would be. You get a lot of stares and, you're talking about these classes. And then as they start to understand what a nurse does, I remember having this conversation. People are like, well, doesn't a nurse just, sponge scalpel to the doctor? And I'm like, no, they do more than that. But I felt the same thing. Like I had to go shadow and I had to go see that, that is the case. There's more to nursing than what I saw a nurse do on TV, as it were. And so I think exposure is probably the biggest thing. And Raja mentioned it earlier, just as David did. And I think Nick as well, you can practice so many different ways. You can go work for an insurance company. You can go be a sales rep for medical equipment. You can, of course, work in a hospital and doctor's offices, all those things that we see a lot of. But again, many different fields that you can get into because you have a clinical background.
Thank you, Rob, for your question. And again, I'm just going to add from what they said. I guess the big thing is to start with the image of nursing, correct? Like what we can do to improve the image of nursing. And I think the first thing is not about saying like, yes, we're the most preferred profession nationwide, is what we need to talk. We need to start the conversation about it. There's a book years ago called From Silence to Voice. It's targeted from two journalists. They try to contact nursing leaders to know more about the profession. A lot of nursing across the world, we're still not communicating very well or doing a good well in marketing and going outside sometimes and saying what are we capable to do and what we can do. So a lot of the things, and this is one of the reason now, and I would like to say literally, this is a great initiative from the School of Nursing, the We Dare. This is something very important, and we need to start thinking and having the strategic direction moving forward. Because, again, now you want to start thinking, how can you go outside your bubble, outside the healthcare bubble, educate the public, educate everyone about what are you capable to do, whether it's finance, whether it's informatics, whether it's taking care of patient, whether it's ethics, whether it's psych, whether it's any profession you can go. I think nursing reach an unlimited, the word of unlimited opportunities. We are involved in every single aspect in healthcare. We can speak everybody's language. We can work with communities. We can go and talk and identify a problem in the society. We can go anywhere we want. And then we can move forward. After we start this moving with this initiative, we can start moving, okay, I think we can move forward with the gender and say, okay, why male nurses are not joining, the numbers are not increasing. I think it's going to be automatically, they're going to start increasing and joining the nursing, because when they see what's the potential, what are you capable to do? One of the things I would definitely share is there's always something new. There's always, you can go anywhere you want. You can travel anywhere you want. Any state, any country, any specialty. That's nursing. Unlimited. Sky is the limit. So.
I would say too, when we think about increasing men in nursing, the question we need to be asking is how do we increase diversity as a whole? And so, if we just target men, then we're still not on the right pathway. And diversity comes from deliberate acts, and so we really need to. I think, as Paul said, we need to be doing outreach. We need to be getting into schools early. I think more men don't go into nursing because they don't realize that it's an option. But I think we have to cast a really broad net and get out and socialize healthcare careers as a whole to a very diverse group of individuals, and going into underserved areas and looking at diversity of thought, race, ethnicity, gender. So we have to really look at all those things, and those come through very deliberate acts.
So I think what we're all kind of saying is, and something that I think is missing is, what do I get out of being a nurse? Okay, and I think that's always something everyone. What do I get out of this profession? What about this job? So I become an electrician. Great. It's a very heavy male-dominated workforce. What do I get out of it? I would challenge that we in nursing, and maybe men in particular, haven't done a good job of sharing what is the rewarding things that we get out of this. I've been in an ICU, high adrenaline person, and you would probably think that my most memorable moment is something like that, right? And you would be wrong. My most memorable moment is a patient I took care of for 6 days who was dying. And on his last few breaths, as he was dying, his family was there, and I'd made a little connection with his 3-year-old granddaughter. And she could talk really well for a 3-year-old. And she asked, "Can I sing to Papa?" And I was like, "Sure." Thought she was going to sing to him. But no, she walks 8 steps over, and there's this ECMO stool we used to stand on ECMOs. And she can't pick it up. She's only 3. She picks up the edge, and she drags it, makes this screeching sound going across the floor, drops at her grandpa's bedside. She climbs up 3 steps, holds his hand, and starts singing to him, "You are my sunshine." I try not to cry here. But that is the most rewarding moment I've had in 25 years. And I don't think we share them. 13 years ago still gets me. But a profession needs to be rewarding to us. And if we don't share what that reward is, then we're doing ourselves a bit of a service. And I think we've all kind of said that. But it's something that we probably need to do better to get ourselves out there, because this is a hell of a rewarding profession. We see so much, we impact lives so much, and it's just not known. I mean, if you've never had the opportunity to be part of a medical issue that goes on in your family, you don't see the work that nurses do, and especially the work that male nurses do in that profession. So I think there's really something in there about showing how rewarding this can be for someone. You know, it's if you think about, you know, what's a job, what's a career, right? A job. I show up, I do the work, I collect my paycheck at the end of the week, I go home, I live my life. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you have a career, something you're truly vested in, something that you're always trying to promote, make better, make it better for the next people coming behind you, that's what something that nursing gives all of us to do. And I think we're all good examples of that specific piece. But yeah, it's the rewarding work you get from nursing. And sorry for the few tears there for a sec.
Say hopefully final words, and hopefully answering your question too. We need to really work on our professional nursing organizations to have more influence over our social media and our TV shows and movies. If you look at the popular TV shows right now, like The Good Doctor, how many of you see The Good Doctor? Do you ever see a nurse on that show? They're in the room, they're in the ICU, taking care of the patient, hanging an IV, giving them medications, supporting families. We all know, or a lot of you will find out, that's not really the reality. The reality is those are nurses at the bedside taking care of those very important things for patients and families. And those are not always reflected. So to answer your question, I really think we need to really lean in on our professional organizations to really, you know, make a more concerted effort to get nurses on those shows, real nurses that can actually influence how the scripts are written, how nurses influence the patient care that happens in hospitals, in communities. One of the most rewarding opportunities that I've ever had was to work with our county school nurse program. And really, I was blind to see how important the work of a school nurse is. And I've been a nurse now for quite many years. So really highlighting the important work that different aspects of nursing do across our country and across every hospital and healthcare system is really where we need to go. This year is the year of the nurse. How many of you had heard that before? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Great. That needs to be blown up, right? We know we celebrate Nurse Day every May of every year. And yes, there's a lot of internal organizational announcements about it. But how do we get the, every year celebration of the Day of the Nurse, or now this year, which is the Year of the Nurse? How do we get more of that media out there about the importance of nursing, what the nursing work is like, to really improve not only people's perception of what nursing profession is, but also to attract more, like Devin said, more people to nursing, because it really is not just male-driven workforce. It really needs to be all different groups. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Additional questions at this point? Anything burning?
Thank you. Actually, something that you, David, said made me think of this, but I'm really fortunate to work on a unit with a lot of different, very diverse staff, a lot of men and women, all different ages, come from different places. And I think it makes us a really good team. I'm curious to hear how you guys have experienced teams that have a lot of diversity, and what makes that work well. How do you work well best when there's kind of other men in your cohort? And then I'm also curious to hear if there's anything that maybe just when you work with other female nurses, anything that really makes I guess just kind of makes you feel like we're all part of the same team. So.
That's a hard question. I think it's what makes any team good. I will have to say that in my career, I have not ever been on a team with several men on the team. I worked in a burn center, and there was 3 guys, that worked in there. I worked evenings, one worked days, one worked nights. I would have to say, with those, I probably had more issues with my male counterparts than I ever did with the females, and I think it was just for odd things. We heard earlier, when I introduced myself, I'm a nurse. That's what I am. And beginning of my career, you'd always, oh, you're the doctor. No, I'm the nurse. And I'd see some of my colleagues, they wouldn't correct that as a male. They would let that play out. If you want to call me a doctor, then I'm getting something out of that, and I'd always get so frustrated with that. We're the nurses. But I think in that dynamic too, as far as my female counterparts and all that, it was nothing about, not to me anyway. I never saw any kind of a gender or anything like that. We were a team, and some of them were awesome and some of them not so much. And you're only as good as your weakest link, I always say, on a team. And so how are you building those people up, and how are you all communicating throughout that team? So I know you're asking with the diversity, and maybe other guys have. I can just say in my own personal career that there hasn't been a lot of diversity. There just hasn't been.
I think that is an exceptional point, which you made here about diversity. So working at other institutions, I will say that if you are part of a group or a team or a member, it's the same people that have been there for 10, 20 years, and they have that select group. So if you have the same people thinking the same way, do you think there's going to be new ideas or insights? What do you think? No? Probably not? Yeah, so that's what happens. So a lot of these places, that changes here at University of Michigan. So University of Michigan, they value that diversity. So they'll have males, females, young, old, different ethnic backgrounds. They'll have everything together to breed those new ideas and insights. Because without that, then you're just kind of becoming complacent. So I think that diversity is a huge point.
So I work in a pediatric ER, and there's not many male nurses down there. But that has changed. This year alone, I think we gained 3 or 4 new male nurses. And being in the pediatric ER, I think you can't get more diverse than that with the staff that we have, being doctors, nurses, techs, clerks, interacting with different floors and different areas of the hospital, trying to take care of one patient or many patients. In my career, I've definitely seen an increase of the male presence in the nursing profession, and I think we have to do a better job promoting it. I think right now there's only 13% of nurses are male nurses worldwide. I mean, we've made some improvements, but I think we can do better.
Same thing. When I started as a pediatric nurse, same thing. As a first male pediatric nurse in that hospital, it was a little bit different, unique, I would call it. But again, it's what you can bring to the table. And each one of us is unique, correct? Like, it's not only about male or female. When we're looking at any team approach, it's looking about how you can bring what you can bring to the team. What can you bring to the table? Different thinking, different approach, different, tools or anything going on. I would definitely say, to answer your second part of the question, what can we do? I think now where we at now in the hospital, we're considering a lot. We're having a lot of discussion on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and this is something, it's been moving forward. We value a lot, diversity. First of all, we're changing the definition of diversity by itself, changing the perception about diversity. And this is something, again, it's a work moving forward, whether it's only on gender, whether it's on anything else. I think it's most important is to go back to the main mission. Why are we here? What's the mission of the team? And what can you contribute to the team? Regardless of male or female. Funny story, I would always say, I worked one time with a group of male nurses. Believe me, like, there was this misconception. One of the male nurses came to me and he said, which was, I have to share it, was inappropriate at that time. And he's like, oh, well, we're all male, there's no drama. And believe me, that night shift that I worked with them, they were complaining more of my female colleague that night shift in one of the ICUs. So again, there's a lot of stigma going. There's a lot of this, endless discussion going on. It's not about gender. It's more about the person and what they can do.
Yeah, and I think part of this too is, I don't know if this is necessarily a male nurse, female nurse. I think this becomes the culture of the leadership on the unit. I mean, if the culture of the leadership on the unit really has something that is working and is great, it shouldn't matter what my background is. I should fit into the culture because this is what's promoted. This is what makes us successful. I was blessed to have a fantastic nurse manager. She was awesome. And there was a period of time from 2004 to 2008 where we had just a fantastic group. And ironically enough, on the night shift, we were 50-50, half guys, half girls. And so you never know if you were in, and there was 12 of us on. There would be times where I was the sole guy, and there'd be other times where our only female was the tech. And so you never knew what you were going to get as far as the mix, but the culture was the same. And it was fantastic because it was a very high-functioning unit at that time, all because of the culture that drove it. So I think, yes, there's that piece, but really I think that becomes a leadership structure that really drives that piece.
Great, thank you. So I really like the emphasis we have on talking about the inherent rewards of being a nurse and becoming a nurse as a way of encouraging people to become nurses, including if they are men. In my role in the school over the past few years, I've noticed a bit of a pattern that I'd like to ask your advice on, and it is that sometimes students will have conversations with me about how to navigate conversations with if they're men, with their fathers or uncles or relatives who sometimes might sort of judge a little bit, and it might even be cultural within a family, might kind of judge their dream and their desire to become a nurse. And they want to talk about how to navigate some of those conversations and just sort of the family dynamics that are involved in that. Does anybody have a story or an experience that they could share?
I have a story. Actually, when I decided to go to nursing, a lot of my family members, they were against this decision. And again, this is something, again, I would maybe, I don't want to jump into conclusions. Sometimes it's culture, or sometimes people are not aware about what a nurse can do. So why are you going to go to nursing school? Why are you not going to medical school? Why not being a doctor? And again, I'm not a big fan of word doctor to refer to providers or physicians. Correct? They prescribe, we heal. Nurses heal. Correct? We're treating actually. So again, it took me around, I would say, around 3 to 4 years to change a lot of perception on their mind. And again, I would rely this on the power of knowledge. Like, the more you know, the more you're involved, and the more you communicate what you're capable of. After 3 years, I have a lot of my family member, after being a nurse, they would come back to me with any question related to healthcare. Because now they value my opinion. They know that I know about, cancer. I know about medication. I know about, any system issues, any follow-up things. And again, this is something, it takes time. It was funny, again, my parents in the beginning, they were like, are you sure you want to go in nursing? Let's try. And they were a little bit, not like sure that I'm going to continue. They were like, at a certain point, you're going to go back and transfer. After I graduated, they're my biggest supporters. They supported me to go back to graduate school. They literally, they value nursing. Even now, once you see them, it's like everybody, like if they come, they're both school teacher. So always the best advice is go to nursing school. It's good. Go to nursing school. So again, I think maybe it's related to culture or anything else, but again, it's on us. It's knowing your own identity, knowing, your sense of purpose. Like, I have this person, I'm sure I'm doing what I love, what I have passion to it, and I'm not doing it. I need to be able to, as Rob said, we need to talk about it. We need to share all our moments too.
I guess my advice to you guys, just be transparent, be comfortable in your own skin. There is nothing wrong to be a male nurse. The more you own it, the more people will understand it. It shouldn't be a stigma, and you shouldn't treat it as a stigma.
So I kind of have a tangential story that ties to that, but I think about, the value that we place on being a nurse. And of course, in my case, it was, my mom had an issue than my dad, just because she just didn't know anybody that had been a male nurse. And I think it's how we as nurses value what we do. And so I kind of have a example to share. Everybody probably knows Reese Witherspoon, the actress. Mm-hmm. So her mom is a nurse. She's a doctorally prepared nurse. They were in Tennessee. Her mom was nursing faculty, and her father is a physician. And I heard her speak one day in an interview talking about her daughter. And she said her daughter, Reese Witherspoon's really smart. She was actually smart enough to be a doctor. And I told him, so I guess she wasn't smart enough to be a nurse, because that didn't come out. But here was the mom of someone very prominent who is a very accomplished nurse. But when she spoke about the level of smartness that her daughter has, that she referenced it back to a doctor. And so I think we really have a lot to do to own and be comfortable with what we do. And I think nurses even see in many cases that being a doctor is better. And so we have to be really clear that it's not better, it's different. And so they're complementary, and they're equally important, and they're different pathways. And I think that is, when people say, why didn't you become a doctor? And, the answer is, I didn't want to. And be unapologetic about that.
And I think this part also breeds into a bigger picture. I mean, even nursing in general, we still have a lot of work to do. I remember wearing a stethoscope around my neck as I was finishing the shift, walking out. And I had stopped at the Wendy's when we had one here in the hospital and grabbed some breakfast. And the person there said, "Oh, are you a resident here?" I'm like, "No, I'm a nurse." She goes, "Well, why are you wearing a stethoscope?" And it just had no idea of the work that we do as nurses in general. So I think, yes, we need to promote more with guys, but in nursing, we still have a lot of work to do, because perceptions are there that they really don't understand what the full task of the work is that we do and how we do things. I had a lot of this growing up. I'm the youngest of 6 kids. I'm only the second kid to finish high school. I'm the only kid to go through college. So when I told my family I was becoming a nurse, their knowledge of that was really what they saw on TV. which didn't really promote nurses all that well, right? We basically, when the doc walked in, we stood up and gave them their chair. They sat down, did all those things. It was crazy. Because my family lives in Canada, and Canada's healthcare, if you're not in the major, like Toronto, British, and Vancouver, the healthcare is not that great. So when my mom had her knee replaced in this little wee rural hospital, took her a year and a half to get her knee replaced, by the way, it was crazy. I walked in, and my mom was in a lot of pain. And I remember saying to the nurse there, can we call and get a pain consult? They're like, we don't call the doctors for that. I'm like, what do you mean you don't call them for that? They go, we wait till they come around. So I couldn't believe it because it's very different than what we have here in the U.S. And then when he came around, it was kind of crazy. Like stood up, everyone stood up, pushed him a chair, and like handed him a coffee. I was like, am I in the 1950s here? It's like kind of crazy. And I say this because my wife is a CRNA, and so went through the CRNA program, and she works with anesthesia providers all the time. And you would not believe how many times she hears from anesthesiologists saying, I wish I had went and become a nurse and become a CRNA. I spent 4 years of residency going to all these areas. You know how many that work in them when I'm done? None. I work in the OR. I wasted all those years doing all that education to do the same job that you're doing, and I wish I had taken your path. Okay, so even some physicians are finding that, gosh, maybe becoming the doctor wasn't everything it was meant to be. So it's just kind of interesting, all the little things that end up becoming reality, but was really driven by perception as to where people went. So, and we need to do a better job in nursing in general to get that out.
A little bit of a funny story to answer your question. If you remember Archie Bunker, my father-in-law was a little bit like that. When we went to tell him we were going to get married, he was like, but how are you going to support my daughter? You're a nurse. Back then in the 80s, nurses weren't making that much money. I think my first full year salary was about $18,000. So I think his perspective was two things. Number one, I'm a nurse. You're not going to make a lot of money, and how are you going to support my family? But two, the statement he made that will always resonate with me, he goes, but you're so smart. Why don't you become a doctor? So to me, that was a telling sign that he really needs to be educated about what kind of work I do and the things I do and how I help people. And over time, of course, our relationship built, and we had a successful relationship in our family. But those are just the biases that you do have to overcome, sometimes even in your family. And those are tough to deal with. And there's no two ways about that.
You're reminding me of a funny story. I had this patient in the ICU and had a really good bond with him. And a intern had walked in, and it was August. So, interns' coats went from short coats to long coats the month before. And he wanted to do something, and I was outside, but he didn't know I was there. And he goes, okay, but is it okay with Rob? And I just started cracking up laughing because, like, from the patient standpoint, I'm like, you have a physician telling you what they're going to do and write an order. I don't really get much of a say unless I don't agree with it, and I can escalate it, but I really can't change it. But here he is saying, well, is it okay with the nurse that you want to do what you're actually doing? I was cracking up laughing. I don't think he thought it was that funny, but I thought it was hilarious.
I just wanted to make a quick comment to it, just to answer Rashika's question. I had a PhD student I was talking to about this same topic beforehand, and I thought it was really funny that something that resonated a lot with me. He heard about this where someone made the comment, are you man enough to be a nurse? And I thought that was great, and because it does take a lot of work, and it also talks about the uniqueness that we provide.
Hi, I'm Kevin Joyner. I'm actually new on the faculty here in school nursing, and my experience is in community health. I'm working community health centers as a nurse and nurse practitioner. And one thing I wanted to know was about how can we, as on the faculty of school nursing, there aren't very many of us. Steve is one of them over there. As men and the rest of the faculty in the school nursing, how can we have help men who are kind of coming up in nursing and support them and also support sort of the diversity agenda of the school?
I'll start again, but you guys please join us. I'm happy that we're all here today because, as you see in our panel, we're committed to helping all our colleagues, whether they be male or female, and that if people are struggling in your programs and they want to reach out to, I would offer myself, but I know any of these guys would step up and say, we are here to help. We could do that for them because I hope you're seeing the amount of passion and compassion you see in the panel towards our profession, but each other. And you could have that commitment, at least for me, that anytime that we could partner with our colleagues in the school, and if you're needing some, reach out to somebody who just wants to shadow us or to have one-on-one time to help them through some struggles they may be having, adjusting to their new career or profession. That's what we're here for.
Well, okay. So I've been teaching here 4 years, and I think what is hard for me is I still feel like the male in the group, when you have 8 students, still has to serve that role. And I've been at a nursing school 8 years where every group had 2 guys. And I think it's more having open discussions. What role does that person serve, and why do they have to serve a role? Why can't it just be a nursing student? And I still feel like, despite the diversity, I don't know what the answer is. I feel by the peers, I think in the last group, yep, this guy's the guy in the group, and then everybody sort of feeds into that, even though that person doesn't want to be that role. I think it's how the students, what they want from that, or I think we do need to do more because it's still happening, and I think for that person, it is hard to be in that spotlight sometimes.
So same as Jesus said, I think we're all available. Anytime you want any help, please reach out. Again, we're more willing to help with any situation or shadowing or any information. And again, same thing. I feel again, we wanna go back and move. We wanna move nursing forward. Correct? It's more like about the profession itself. We wanna go out this label. Being a male or feeling the stigma anymore, male or female or anything else. We want to go think about it. Like, I'm a nurse, number one, whether I'm in the community leader, I'm in the society, or anywhere else.
Hello, my name is Josiah. I'm a first-year student, and I've kind of developed an interest in like health policy and like the administration side of nursing. So I had a question for Rob Burke about what like inspired you to pursue an MBA, and how's that like helped or influenced what you do now in the hospital?
Yeah, it's a great question. With my master's, how I went that way, and it really came down to me personally, as I was in my career, like, okay, what's my next move? I love clinical. I was always clinical. I'd gotten into leadership because of clinical, and I think that's something in nursing. A lot of times how we develop leaders is, oh, you're great at the bedside, you get to be a leader, and leadership isn't necessarily that. It's a lot of growth, and those people aren't necessarily like the best leaders. Some of the nurses that aren't the best at the bedside are some of the best leaders because of the traits that they have. But I was at that crossroads, and it was conversations with actually a CEO at the time that I was working with, and as I was going to pursue, my education, he said, Rob, I've worked with you. I know you as a nurse, and I know the clinical knowledge that you have and that sort of thing. If you're really looking at a master's, because at that time was it an MBA or like MHA, he's like, that MBA is great and it's diverse. You can do more. It has more out of it than just healthcare. Mine's truly an MBA, and it didn't have, the healthcare aspect of it. So for me at the time, it was just, I think, that diversity for me, can that open up a door that's outside of healthcare if I choose to do that, I think in retrospect, there was also, I had a college where I was at, I'm from Indiana, and they actually had a split MBA MSN, and I wish I would have done that personally, but that's just kind of feeding back to my decision of how I made it. Thank you.
I just wanted to add to what Rob already said, but I think it's important and people don't recognize in nursing leadership roles when you're managing a unit that might have 60 to 70 nurses or a division of nursing, like, Devin and I lead, you're managing over thousands of people. Our budgets are $160 million. That's just for C&W nursing. So you go out in the community, and when you talk to your business people in the community, they don't really recognize that. But you really have to have the business skills as they do to run big businesses. And healthcare, I know we don't like to think about it that way, but it is a business, and you need those skill sets to be able to lead major nursing departments too. So if you are on the leadership track idea, it really does matter if you talk to any one of us to help coach and mentor you, get you into the right program to be able to meet the needs that you're looking for, to be able to lead big departments in the future, if that's what you're leaning towards.
Hi, I'm Neil. I'm also a first-year student, and I'd like to bounce off that question a little bit and just ask. Earlier, we were talking about different specialties, both like laterally and vertically, and I was just wondering if there's like any particular questions you ask yourself or experiences you seek out in order to find the specialty that you feel like you fit best in. Just wondering how all of you have been able to narrow down your career path.
After 34 years, I'm still trying to figure that out because I strategically looked at different opportunities to help me grow in different ways. So from emergency room to pediatrics to trauma to the operating room to forensics. To me, that was just my personality style that really wanted to explore all aspects of nursing. And I still believe of myself as still being that explorer. Yes, I might be the chief nursing officer, and you might see that as the top of the career that I wanted to achieve, but it's not. I don't know what I'd like to do in the next 3 to 5 years.
So when I did the specialties, I liked OB, peds, and psych. But then the idea of being responsible for somebody's infant and or a 3-day-old baby petrified me. I knew it was probably pediatric psych that was best for me. And then I would say, I know there's a push to go back and do a graduate degree. If it's your passion, do it right away. If you're hesitant, don't do it because you think it's the right decision, because you'll regret. I think some of the most formative years for me was those first couple years as a graduate nurse, knowing who I was as a person, not having the stress of necessarily formalized education. It was seeking out opportunities. So allow yourself sometimes patience to be okay with that job you get right out of, because you'll learn so much. And then do go back to do things when it truly you have that passion and that fire. And that's where I found I was doing it for me, not what other people thought I should do or what my peers can do. I always tell my students, you'll have plenty of time to save the world. Do what makes you passionate or happy at the moment, and things will find you, and you'll find opportunities you wouldn't have even thought of.
I just want to snowball on that one too. I couldn't agree more. If you're not sure, there's nothing wrong with waiting. I didn't finish my master's till I was 40. And that was the best decision because all my time before that, I had ideas, but I had no concrete plan of what I wanted to do. And so I think that by the time I finally did my master's, I had so much clinical background to back it up that it made sense for things. So I couldn't agree more with you, Paul. I mean, if you are not sure, there's nothing wrong with waiting. And there's always all sorts of electives you can take that will match for any program. You can start knocking those out, but to marry yourself to a track that you're just not sure never hurts to wait. And I've had colleagues over the years who followed that was great, and others who jumped into something and, they're 2/3 way through their CNS program, they're like, I just don't like this, and they change tracks. And then sometimes you have to back up. So it just kind of depends what's there. But the more time you get in clinical, it's never going to hurt, always going to help. It might help you figure out more what you want to do.
I think we probably all have something that we can share with you, like on this aspect of it, right? And to back up, not even from an educational standpoint, but how do you figure out, especially like, do I want to be ED or I want to be ICU or that sort of thing? And I would say, early on in your career, like, be an explorer. I will say, even from my own personal, like, I'm somebody that, like, I get into it, I enjoy it, and then it's kind of that change, right? And we always talk about nursing is always about change, but we hate doing it, right? Like, be okay with being uncomfortable, right? Like, maybe I'm in ED and it's like, do I really want to go to ICU and I'm not confident about that? Go do it. Because the more times you make yourself uncomfortable, the more you're going to grow. And that will take you to all sorts of places in your career that I can't even explain to you right now. So be comfortable with that.
I couldn't agree more with Paul, Rob, and Rob. You want to be uncomfortable. Like, if you feel like you have become a master in that trade, open the doors to something new. Because I started off in adult ER, and like Paul was insinuating that he was scared of peds. I was scared to death of peds. I wanted nothing to do with them. And then I went to peds ER next, and I loved it. And I prefer taking care of kids now. But it's because, like, I let myself grow, and then I wanted to try something new. And then I tried rapid response then went to life flight. Like, all those things were building blocks to your next opportunity. So, like, if somebody that stays in one unit, a lot of times they'll just stay there forever. But if you open the door and try something new, you'll probably be rewarded handsomely, because you can look, everybody here, almost everybody's had multiple jobs. Multiple jobs. It's because all those new experiences, all those new people you interact with, all those new, like, management teams. Like, if you're worried, like, some of them, you might not have value. Like, you don't think they have a diverse enough team, or you don't think that this is right. You can see all those perspectives, and then all those bring value to you and whatever you want to work on going forward. It just makes you a more successful person. So, couldn't agree more with everybody.
I think all of us probably many of us here are doing something different than what we started out doing. So that goes to what Nick was saying about exploring. I think as your career evolves over time, the things that you like about one job open doors to do other things. So I loved, I was an ICU nurse, and I loved that. I loved being able to precept students and work with students and new grads when they came in. That opened a door for me to have an opportunity to teach, and I really thought that was going to be the way I saved the world. And then after a few years, I realized that the student that graduates this year will be the nurse next year that has adopted every bad habit that is the culture of a unit. And so I would be appalled a year later to see what some of the nurses did, because that's how we do it, quote, in the real world. And so that kind of opened my eyes a little bit to say, we can teach best practices, but the reality is that, to make this stick is to create a culture on a unit. And so I never had any aspirations of being a leader. I was very clear I was never going to be administration, had no desire to do any of that. What I did have a desire to do was to provide the best clinical care. And so I went from being a staff nurse doing that to teaching others how to do that, to leading others and trying to create systems and processes that support nurses doing the best at what they do and achieving optimal outcomes. And so from that, I would say still first and foremost, I'm a nurse providing care. I'm just doing it in a very different way in a leadership role.
So I can really kind of relate to the question you asked, because not only was I second career, so completely different career going into nursing, but being in the second career program, I only had 12 months to I felt like figure it out. And when I first started nursing school, I just assumed I would just take whatever job, whoever would hire me when I got out of nursing school. Like, I knew I wanted to work at U of M, but I figured wherever I was hired would be fine. And then I was fortunate to do my clinical rotation on the old, what was 12 West. And I remember the first day of clinical, my clinical instructor said, anybody who's never had any experience with children, raise your hand. I was the only person who raised my hand. I'd never changed a diaper. I don't have kids. I mean, I played with my nephew when he was 5, but that was, no experience. So it was kind of a terrifying experience for me, just being on a peds floor. But I have to tell you, by the end of that rotation, it's weird to say, but I knew. I took care of, I held infants. I took care of kids with neurologic deficits. I took care of kids that were getting over ortho traumas. Just a wide variety. I kind of knew. And then I did an adult med surg on 5C. I think it was back then. It was GI transplant. I don't know what it is now. And going through that one, I was like, yeah, I want to do peds. So I kind of just knew, and I think you will. But don't be afraid to change. My gosh, I changed careers. Like, people thought I was nuts when I gave up a career that paid a heck of a lot more than I'm making now. Was a lot, had great benefits. But don't be afraid to change. But you'll kind of know. You'll get through a bunch of experiences. And for any of you out there, if you feel like you don't, I know U of M's nursing program now, especially in peds. I think you guys have like 3 weeks with us. It's kind of crazy. If you don't feel like you get enough, just reach out to us. Any one of us would be more than happy to have you just hang with us for a 12-hour shift. I'm completely biased for pediatrics, but just hang out with us for a day and really, forget the nursing school part of it and forget we won't make you do vitals or assessments. Just hang out and really see what we do, and you'll know.
Just touching on what everyone else has said, like David did, find those opportunities. If you have a question about it, and if it's not, we don't work in one of those areas, everyone here knows someone that does. I'm pretty sure everyone would nod their head. But then, try to find those shadow opportunities. I know you're students, I know you're busy, but when there's fall break or spring break, find a couple hours and just say, hey, I want to go shadow in the ICU. I want to go shadow in this area. Because those 4 hours, 12 hours you get, again, will help put that trajectory for where you want to go when you start applying for jobs.
Any paramedics or EMTs around here? Anybody? So you'll never stop learning. I've been an ER nurse for quite some time. A few years ago, I had an opportunity to help develop our hospital emergency response team. And what that is, it helps deal with disaster management. Unfortunately, nationwide, there isn't very much pediatric disaster management out there when it comes to hospitals. It's great for adults, if you work in an adult ER, we know how to manage adult patients if they become contaminated or if you have mass casualty. But there's not so much out there when it becomes pediatric patients. So that's what draws me to ER nursing, because it's always diversified. There's always something new to learn. And there's always opportunities for you to reach out and grab it and take it to the next level.
Same as before. Again, same thing. Challenge your comfort. Try new things. And this is the time, once you're in school, this is the time where you have the opportunity to go and be able to be exposed to different experience. And when you start working, always challenge your comfort. Don't say, okay, I'm happy where I am. Sometimes it's a little bit awkward, but go and learn. This is the only way you can learn new things. I remember when I started in the pediatric ICU, my first patient was a little bit baby, and literally I was so terrifying. This is my first shift with my preceptor, and the patient was hooked up to all these IV tubes, monitor, all the things, and I was like trying to learn how to change the diaper of the patient, literally, and making sure I'm not going to touch any of these tubes. Now, just reflecting at that moment, this experience, I would say, gave me a lot of, insight on how to be more detail-oriented, how to be more thinking about all the ins and the outs, and making me more like, grow me. In every single role I've been in, talking about quality, patient safety, leading project on a system level, and now going back on operational side, dealing with staffing and budget and quality metrics and different things. Again, it's going outside the comfort and learn and take it as an opportunity to learn and say what's next until you reach. I feel like, again, it's on a continuum. Until you know your strength very well, and you're gonna be very comfortable to say, this is where I want to stay for this period of time.
Get over it. One more thing, never settle. I just want to tell everybody here, don't ever settle, because I know a lot of times people say you can't do this job, you can't do that right when you get out, or you don't have experience. Never say, if you're willing to put the work in, just do not settle. Don't let anybody hinder whatever future destiny you want. If you're willing to work for it, you can make it happen. So do not settle ever.
That's a good one. Just remember, no today does not mean no tomorrow. Especially when your bosses say you can't have that funding. So just keep asking. The other part of this, too, is we're talking about our professional practice, right? But there's also life. Okay, you will want to find some kind of work-life balance. And so, especially speaking to the people who are in nursing school now, if you are young and you want to travel, That's where nursing is fantastic. You can travel. I graduated in 1995. I know none of you guys were alive then. But I graduated in a really bad economic time, and there was no jobs. So I went from London, Ontario, Canada, to McAllen, Texas, which was so different. Here I am
students and that's been around me. But actually a great job when you're first like in nursing school and that sort of thing is a summer, go be a server at a restaurant, like a, really like Lone Star or something, or, I don't even know what it called, Roadhouse or something like that, that turns over people fast. Because what that teaches you is I'm taking care of 4 or 5 tables. It's customer service. I'm scripting how I talk to people. It's my presentation. It's all that sort of stuff, and be able to handle that. And that skill set translates incredible when you go to the bedside. Because it is totally the same way. I'm walking into that room, I'm introducing myself, I'm making that genuine connection right away, and I'm providing them that customer service and all that sort of thing. And it's true. It's crazy how much they're similar.
Hi, so I enjoyed hearing about Rob's most meaningful moment, and I was wondering if anyone else had one they wanted to share, because I find those really inspiring and remind me why I want to do nursing. So.
No more crying.
There's tons of them. And in fact, actually, when we were saying that, I think I had tears in my eye when he was saying that, honestly, because I think that's a difference when we were talking about men in nursing, and we don't talk about it enough. And I think from what I've heard from most of us, I think a lot of us up here have a very compassionate side for people. And so I think that's huge. I think that's nursing, right? I think that's genuine nursing. It's not a paycheck. It's when we think of this as our true profession, it's because we genuinely care about people. Can you make good money at it? Sure. And there's people out there now that they're just in it for that money. And you see the difference if you see a nurse that's in it for money or have that like total like passion inside of it and compassion for other people. And as you was saying that, I mean, just a flood of different people that I've met and, throughout time have there's all sorts of things from the families you touch to the individual patient. I'll quickly go to one that's another like rough one, and it was just the moment in time where when I was in the burn center, and it was a toddler that we were terminally weaning, and being able to, I actually was the person that deflated the cuff, took the tube out, took that baby and handed it to its mom for its last time, and just you're in that moment forever with that person. And how do you handle it? With grace and dignity and compassion.
So I probably won't get through this without tearing up. We talk about the impact that we have in people's lives, and there was a family, one of our specialties on 12E's is respiratory. We do a lot of cystic fibrosis, and there was a family that had 2 boys with cystic fibrosis, which is kind of really poor odds. And one of the younger kids, he was 13 years old, and he nicknamed me Super Dave, not only because I wear superhero scrubs all the time, but because he really got to know me, I got to know him, and we were just sort of best buddies. His cystic fibrosis took a turn where we thought maybe he would get past it, but he ended up going to the ICU. He ended up getting intubated, and it was completely unexpected. But I'd been taking care of him for probably 5 years. So I got to know the family. I got to know his older brother. We had many, many hours of conversation, especially with the older brother, about just life. And he would always ask me, like, how am I going to, get through life with cystic fibrosis? Like, he didn't even want to go to college because he didn't want to waste 4 years of his life, so we tried to come up with other careers that might jumpstart that. But I got to know this family really well. And when Blake died, I actually had to take a couple of days off from work because it was really emotional time for me. Not only being there in the ICU for the family, I spent many hours, and I had a therapy dog, Bailey. I brought Bailey up to the ICU, and Bailey hung out with Blake for a while and the family. But also, they asked me to speak at the funeral, and I remember speaking at Blake's funeral, and just I couldn't believe that. It was like, oh my gosh, I'm a bedside nurse, and I'm speaking at this family's funeral. Like my perspective on what this kid, what his life was, and how much I knew about it. So, I mean, that's one of many, but that family probably sticks out more than any other in terms of the impact that you have, not only on your patients' lives, the care you give them, but also on the care that you give their family. Because we always talk about the patient care, but the family care is the other part of the equation. And, the outcomes aren't always what we hope for, but you're also there to get them through that journey, and I, to this day, and Brett, he's doing well. He got a lung transplant. It took a weird turn. He got an infection after he got his lung transplant, and he went blind. And he was on 6C, in the main hospital. I visited him when he was going blind, and it was, we talked about that, and he's like, "What crappy odds are those?" But he got through it, and even now, I mean, he's 23 years old, and we still chat all the time, and we have lunch, and so I love the impact that we have on families and the difference you're going to make in their lives as well.
Just share another kind of story like everyone else. So my dad, as it passed away, and so he had some health issues. So I'm like, full Marine dress blues, get a phone call like, "Hey, your dad's in the hospital." So I go there, sorting everything, running through a hospital, fully dressed up, and they talk about, not medical at this point, degree in physiology, but nothing really healthcare related. After that, he's discharged, and again, coming home from doing some stuff for the base I got relocated to, helping him up the stairs, he collapses. So I ended up doing CPR on my dad, calling 911, the whole 9 yards. And so it's one of those things, after that moment, you're like, I never want to be in a place where I don't know what to do, and so that's hard. And so, going through nursing school, working the code and rep response team, you make sure you can, use all the knowledge we have to help other people's families. And when I remember working in trauma before that, family member couldn't find out why this guy was still sick. I mean, he's doing okay, but his white cell count was just really high. Ended up doing exploratory labs just to figure it out. Ended up having cancer throughout him, so he ended up passing away in the ICU. And I remember having all his brothers come in at night, and they would just like make fun of each other back and forth. And we got to know each other. We're 4 nights in a row, and I could throw jokes in about each of them too. And so you have that bond with this family for a short period of time. Anyway, passing away in the unit. And so I remember talking with the daughter just about what it's like losing a dad, and just got to have that interaction. And so again, it's like those small moments. And I remember there's another nurse at work who's not a hugger, and I'm a hugger. And so she comes in and she sees me and heard that this guy passed away that day, and she just comes up to me, hugs me, and I was like, "No, I'm okay." And she just hugs me a little bit tighter, and then you just start crying. My patient currently sedated, so he didn't know what's happening. But again, it's just those small moments. You have to help a family member, another nurse realized how I was feeling and just came to help me. So it's just neat to see how things in your life before you became a nurse, undergrad, things outside of school can affect how you practice.
So I'd like to share a happier example with you too, because I do think the memories that we carry with us the longest often result in, they come from those kinds of really very emotional situations. But I also think of just some simple examples around being, and this was an example here at Michigan and in the SICU. And so one day I'm spending some time in the unit, and there's a patient, and she's come in from another hospital, and she's very sick, and we've proned her, we've placed her face down to try to improve oxygenation, and we've done all these things, and they end up putting her on ECMO, and it's obvious that the woman is not going to live. And it was just a really sad situation. So about a week and a half later, I was back on the unit, and when I went by her room, there was another lady in the room sitting up in a chair, and she was vigorously brushing her hair. And I was like, "Oh, when did the lady that was in here the other day, when did she die?" And they're like, "Oh, she didn't die, that's her." So it was that same patient that had just completely, and she's up, now waiting for a bed to go out and very worried about her hair. But it was one of those things where this is somebody that I saw, one day at their worst, and because of really good medical care and especially good nursing care, that 24-hour round-the-clock care, it's somebody that really didn't have a chance of surviving, came from an outside hospital as a last-ditch effort, and really just sent her here, I think, with the intent that she would die at Michigan. And so she discharged and walked out the door.
So first off, I quickly want to share, if you end up working in a hospital where we have framework here, there are a lot of hospitals called a ladder. It is really important. It's about improving and advancing in your practice, and part of our portfolio is writing exemplars. And I've advanced in our framework, and I would say the advice to my younger self would be to, when you have things like this happen, write it down. It can be very inspiring, particularly in my field. We deal a lot with high burnout. We're dealing with a lot of trauma. and quickly share my exemplar was kind of a happy one. We deal a lot now with kids, unfortunately, that are in foster care situations, and there's not always the best transition due to the demand of helping families prepare for a child to enter their home. And I'm really thankful for these people. I got to work with a young couple that really showed how I use my skill set. I'm not a father, and sometimes when you're in pediatrics, that sense of identity is how do I serve these people best when I don't know what it's like to be a parent, but I can use my years as a nurse to help younger couples that are about my age. So